for so long, the leadership archetypes that we've talked about and the stories that we've talked about in the leadership space are men's stories. Like that's the male leader is seen as the standard leader. And what I'm trying to do is say, let's start sort of centering women's leadership. Look at how women lead, all the multifarious ways in which women lead, and what can we learn from those.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Inventor and author of Primal Habits, Uninflamed, Master of You, and Body Thrive, and soon to be released, The Witch's Cancer Journal.
A weaver of words and ancient worlds into the future.
Plumbing for depth in the playground of your continual reinvention.
A wisdom rich, Agayana Yohini.
And now the moment we've been waiting for is here.
Ringleader of Club Thrive and Wellness Pro Academy.
A freedom warrior, earth mother, proud mama, devoted wife.
Not your grandmother's Ayurveda.
Futurist. Biohacker. Guru and goofball.
Where truth and freedom prevail.
Evolving the ancient into the future.
Welcome to the Thrive with Cate Stillman podcast. Made for you by us.
Hello, everyone. It's Cate Stillman with the Thrive with Cate podcast, and I'm here with Jocelyn Davis, and we're going to talk a bit about some of her books, including the one that she released in 2023 called Insubordinate: 12 New Archetypes for Women Who Lead. So we're going to dive into one of my favorite topics, which is archetypes and understanding our personality and our persona, and knowing that we do transcend that persona. It can also be helpful to know a bit about how we do show up in the world. So welcome to the podcast, Jocelyn.
Thanks so much, Cate. Great to be with you.
Yeah. So why don't you do a quick review of the 12 archetypes and how this can help women who are, wanting to step more into their own leadership to know more about themselves?
Sure. Yeah. So this set of archetypes was something that I came up with as I was thinking about writing a book specifically about women's leadership. And a couple of my previous books are about leadership in general. But I wanted to write one that was focused on women. And the idea that I had was that it was thinking about the hero's journey, which I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with. So the hero's journey for men is a very kind of linear, kind of marching forward kind of metaphor, if you will. And it's used a lot in leadership development circles, and many people are familiar with it. But I thought that it didn't apply all that well to women leaders and to the hero's journey for women, or the heroine's journey, if you will. In my view, women, as they sort of step out and take the lead in the world, are more, it's less of a linear journey and more of a kind of expansive journey. So it's kind of coming into our own. It's acknowledging the many talents and capabilities that we have in us. And I sometimes get in trouble for saying this, but I think that women's range is wider than men's. So we have the capacity to sort of step into more roles, more talents, more capabilities, to have more flexibility, if you will, and to just be more broad in our range of talents than many men have the capacity to be. So these archetypes that I started thinking about are based on the 4 classic elements, that is fire, earth, water, and air, that have been around for many, many centuries, thousands of years, these elements. And I started thinking about sort of a circle, which if you look in the book, you'll see that there's a sort of a pie chart type of thing, a circle with those 4 elements at the 4 quadrants. So moving around the circle, you have fire, and then earth at the bottom, and then water on the left, and then air at the top. And when you think about archetypes in this framework, I came up with 12 leadership archetypes. So just to list them out, they are starting over on the fire, or on the right with the fire element. We have the temptress, then the Amazon, then the claimant, and now we're down in the earth area. Then the mama bear, the amiga, the mesmerist, and now we're moving up to water. Then the empath, the escapist, and the snow queen. Now we're up in air. And then the empress, the jesteress, and the witch. So those are the 12 archetypes.
Yeah, so my background's in Ayurvedic medicine with the 5-element theory, and it's interesting to think of the personality types with the types that you have in subordinate. So in terms of people walking through and finding their archetype, how does that work?
So my main point in the book is that each of us is probably going to have one or two archetypes that are our comfort zone, that we're most comfortable with. But what I'm not saying is that this isn't a sort of typology in the traditional sense, where you find, oh, I'm this type, on the Enneagram, I'm type 5, or I'm an INTJ in Myers-Briggs or whatever. There's going to be an archetype, or maybe several, where we feel most at home. But my point is that, again, we, especially as women, we have the capacity to tap into any of these archetypes. We have them all within us. And if we learn sort of, okay, here's my comfort zone, or my home archetype, then that can serve as kind of a strong base for us as we move out and explore in our sort of heroine's journey other archetypes and bring those to bear. And that can be beneficial to us. The other thing that big point that I make in this book is that it benefits us to understand all of these archetypes so that we can appreciate other women and their leadership styles, which are going to be different from ours. And so rather than sort of, looking askance at other women and saying, oh, why is she so bossy, or why is she, such a wimp, or, kind of being snarky. And that way we can say, oh, she's the empress, or she's the temptress, or she's the mama bear. And we can appreciate others' styles at the same time as appreciating our own.
It reminds me of a teaching in Tantra of like seeing the Shri. You're like looking at it's like you look at anything glass half empty, glass half full. It's like, how do you see the divinity? And what you're saying here is in the leadership style.
Yes.
So are there certain leadership styles that you think we need more of, or archetypes that you think that are more for this day and age?
No, not really. What I think is that these 12 archetypes, and you notice that a number of them have the names for them have been often used as derogatory labels for women. So things like the witch, the temptress, the snow queen, and even the empress. Women have been derided for being these things. And I think that in this day and age, what we need to do is reclaim these words, these ideas, and understand what is powerful about each of them. There's no one of these or any of these that is better than the others or sort of more relevant. It's a question of understanding what are the strengths of each, and what are the pitfalls. So each of these archetypes is going to have some sort of characteristic strengths and vulnerabilities. So you want to understand both, and then sort of lean in, if you will, to the strengths of your archetype, and then also discover what's great about some of the others, and see if you can incorporate those into your repertoire.
Have you workshopped with women in leadership with archetypes? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I actually not just with women, but with men as well. I have a workshop that goes along with this book called Women's Archetypes for Every Leader. And I have run it a couple of times, and it's been really interesting because in all cases, there have been men as well in the workshop. And my sort of message is that Although, obviously I'm centering women in this book and in this workshop. Men can benefit as well. I mean, for so long, the leadership archetypes that we've talked about and the stories that we've talked about in the leadership space are men's stories. Like that's the male leader is seen as the standard leader. And what I'm trying to do is say, let's start sort of centering women's leadership. Look at how women lead, all the multifarious ways in which women lead, and what can we learn from those. So it's been interesting because the guys in my workshops most of them start out kind of it's like, uh-oh, is this going to be really awful? And what are we doing here? But as they get into it, it's amazing to see how they sort of start acknowledging, oh yeah, I can really learn from this. I can understand what's my archetype as well, and start thinking about leadership in a different way.
Yeah. So, I mean, your whole career is really centered on leadership. Yeah.
Yes.
And how much, in terms of like landing on writing this book Insubordinate on the archetypes for women, have you, I guess, is it a call to see leadership in a very different way? I mean, it seems to me like it's like noticing it reminds me of like in the Worldwide Association of Action Learning, how they looked at like if we set a goal, like 50% of the goal is to get to the goal and the other 50% is the learning we do on the way to the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It seems to me like a bit of that, of appreciating how leadership shows up in ways that might be really necessary for the future that we want to experience as humanity.
Yeah, for sure. My whole career was in corporate learning, so it was helping leaders and others in the corporate world learn and primarily learn management and leadership skills. We had a saying at the company that I worked for that it was the best place I know to learn and grow. And we tried to sort of bring that ethos into everything that we did with our clients and with ourselves. So, the best leaders are learners for sure. And today it's interesting to see, I mean, this has been going on for several decades now, but the shift from understanding leadership as a very top-down, siloed kind of thing, I'm the manager and therefore I'm the leader, I'm the boss. And so I'm sitting on top of a pyramid and, it's very hierarchical. It's a very masculine way of looking at leadership in that kind of pyramid hierarchy. As over the past few decades, organizations have been moving to a much flatter, more collaborative, more sort of different flexible work arrangements, less hierarchy, more teamwork. This has been going on for quite a while, and a lot of people have written books about this new way of looking at leadership. What nobody has done quite yet, I think, is to really look at how these women's leadership archetypes or styles or ways of leading, ways of being can be brought to bear on leadership in general and help us all do a better job of leading.
Yeah. Do you want to say more about that? Like how in teaching that it actually affects change?
Yeah. Well, so just back to these archetypes that I talk about and sort of women's archetypes for every leader. There's just there are so many different ways and talents that feed into leadership that can help people be better leaders. The old sort of hierarchical model has stuck around with us in the sense that leaders it's a very hero's journey kind of model of leadership that is still in people's minds. So leaders are supposed to inspire, and they're supposed to be, usually you're supposed to be very extroverted, and you're supposed to, craft a vision and get people on board with the vision and lead people forward. Well, that's that's great. And that's one way of leading, and it can be useful in many situations. But then you look at, for example, one of my archetypes is the Amiga. And the Amiga is the person, the woman or the person who is brilliant at making alliances.
Mm.
And so she leads not by sort of putting herself out in front, but by putting herself side by side with people and befriending them or allying with them and saying, hey, let's, I'm going to be with you, you're going to be with me. Let's find our common interests and work together. So that's another very useful leadership style. Another one would be thinking on the other side of the wheel, the temptress. And the temptress is, whoa, that sounds like a kind of weird word for a leader, like temptress. That seems kind of negative. And what were you saying? Like you have to be sexy or something? The temptress is the person who makes other people feel like stars. So she is like the person who shines the spotlight on others, invites them in, makes them feel like they're being part of something really fun, really exciting. And she tempts people in the sense of like inviting them to participate in her, exciting, fun, sparkly world. And so that kind of, magnetic leadership or, tempting leadership can be also very effective. And then one other example that I'll give, which is my favorite archetype. This is my home archetype is the Snow Queen. The Snow Queen is up there in the airy zone. And the Snow Queen is the very, very cool, very cold. She's often derided for being cold, but very analytic, often introverted, kind of removed, wants to stay above all the mess, all the drama. So she's the very cool-headed leader who is able to sort of look down at the big picture and kind of stay out of the emotional mess as she is, saying, here's what we need to do, and here's what we can move this way, we can move that way. So that's another type of leadership. So all 12 of these leadership archetypes can be useful as ways to lead. And I think we bring about change in organizations these days by kind of acknowledging that there's real diversity is truly useful when it comes to leading an organization.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Descent to the Goddess, A Way of Initiation for Women by Sylvia Brenton Pereira?
I have heard of it. I haven't read it.
I think her background it's a bit in Jungian psychology, but so she's combining that with this like Sumerian, the descent of the goddess. So like you're talking about the hero's journey, right? So the heroine's journey is to hell and back. So like the heroine's journey is a different form of ego dissolution, and then almost like an extra version of personality, right? Where it's like then a conscious choosing of like, I will embody this persona in order to do this role, but from a place of I can be anything and anyone.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's a bit where you've landed, is like that there's a way of looking at leadership from a place of what does the situation need? Yeah, I have my natural tendencies, and the more I understand my natural tendencies or my home archetypes, then I can use those consciously, but I can also maybe see where the situation might call for a different persona or a different type of leadership style. One that causes me perhaps to have to like slow down and exhale my ego and let go of my own preferences and in order to be available to what the situation really needs right now. And perhaps women's flexibility in that, because women's bodies, if we just look at the male bodies versus female bodies, like female bodies have to be very flexible, especially if they're designed to bear children, they're designed to radically change in stages of life. So we have a natural innate flexibility. We have a rites of passage that requires physical ego dissolution, putting the self second, right? And like this is just the natural path of the female overall archetype, right? And that it's like if you
Yes.
carry your ego with you, you die. Like that's the whole Sumerian tale of the descent to the goddess.
Mm,
The ego
mhm.
doesn't survive the descent.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself. Yes.
Well, it's exciting. It sounds like for, especially for women who are wanting to maybe transcend some of their patterns in leadership, that this would be a really great place to start.
Yeah. Yeah. One comment that I keep getting about the book is from women who haven't thought of themselves as leaders. And in fact, it makes me sad in a way, because I hear women say, oh, I don't read management books because they scare me. I don't, I'm not, I don't think of myself that way. And all the leadership books out there, they seem scary to me and they're not me.
Mm.
But and then they say it makes me happy, obviously, that they say, but this book really resonated for me, because you're talking about leadership in a way that makes sense to me and makes me see that, oh yeah, because the examples that I share, many of them in the book are corporate examples or business examples, but a number of them are not. They're, there's a woman who's a nurse, or my mom is in the book, who was who didn't have a a quote real job. There are others in the book that just have different types of roles. There's one woman who is a tarot reader. She's and a practicing witch. So she's one of my examples as well. So anyway, there's a bunch of different examples that are not businessy examples. And I think it's really important that women especially understand that the ways in which we lead are not necessarily seen in the in the management books of today. It's like we need different stories and different examples.
Yeah. Well, and what I noticed too at Wellness Pro Academy, we coach all different types of wellness pros, from holistic doctors and practitioners to yoga teachers, gym owners, in a club business model, and we use wealth dynamics as one of the personality tests. And a lot of wellness pros are supporters, and they don't, often coming in, understand that is a wealth dynamic, right? Like it's like just as much as creator is a wealth dynamic, or star, or mechanic, or trader, or lower
Yes.
later, right? Like, and a lot of them, like I'd say close to 50%, especially from the more holistic side, are just really dominant supporter wealth dynamic, and they haven't learned how to monetize that. So then right, they're in a situation where they feel like they're not valued, just simply because they haven't figured out how to turn that into something that someone can basically invest in. But it very much speaks to that, right? To that there's like, the more we know about ourselves, the more we understand our archetypes and which archetypes might be helpful in the next phase of our development and growth. Wow, it really can make our life so much more expansive, and I would say, way beyond our current capacities and capabilities. And to me, that's really what leadership's so much about, is like getting beyond where we've been,
Yes.
personally and professionally.
Exactly. Yeah.
It also reminds me, in my second book, Master of You, where I take a 5-element approach to up-leveling our lives. And, partly that is for my community, or the leadership book. And we look at first actually starting with our space element, which is air, ether, and looking at like home, right? Looking at like, how do we actually up-level the spaces that we're in? How do we architect the environment so that we can show up how we want to show up next? And that also goes to the neuroplasticity, right? Or the personality plasticity of really being able to like clear the space in order to see, and then fire element and seeing, air element and time, calendaring, planning, water element and in flow, and also integrity, earth element and body. So it's exciting to see, I think, just between like what you're doing in your community and what I'm doing in my community as far as women in leadership, that we're getting a much more elemental approach. We can see that in common, right? And we're looking at like that the woman's journey, the goddess journey, isn't one of climbing the mountain. It's usually one of actually going very, very deep into what are actually the core underlying issues that need to be processed for growth to occur.
Yeah. Yes.
Anything else that you'd like to add, Jocelyn?
I would just the only other thing I would add is that the people are interested in myth. There's a myth or fairy tale that I end the book with is the Mastermaid, which is one of the oldest folklore archetypes or types in existence, and it's one of the most widespread folklore types. It's one of the titles of it is Mastermaid, but it has 1,000 different titles, and it's the story of the young man who goes out and into the world, and he finds himself in a giant or an ogre's domain, and there's a woman there, a young woman, the Mastermaid, who he finds there, and she's the daughter of the giant or the wizard or the ogre. She helps him to escape. The story is, as I say, one of the oldest folklore types there is, one of the most widespread. It's found in almost every culture around the world, and I retell it in a way that highlights what I think are the really key elements, literally elements, because the 4 or 5 elements come into the story very strongly. But the story, as it's been interpreted today, is much more of a sort of hero's journey type of story, focusing on the young man and how he is assisted by the woman. In my version, which I'm trying to sort of reclaim from that interpretation, it's the woman, the Mastermaid, is the heroine of the journey. And it's interesting to see how she incorporates all the elements and my 12 archetypes in her adventures. So I think it's a really fascinating story, and I encourage people to look into it. It has an interesting history, and has been told so many different ways in so many different cultures. So yeah.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to say to women who are really wanting to step up their leadership in the next phase of their life?
Just know that you have range. You have more range than you think.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jocelyn. Everyone, this has been Jocelyn Davis, and I'm excited to dive deeper into Insubordinate, 12 New Archetypes for Women Who Lead.